Alright, so the last video that I did, we factored trinomials where all of the trinomials had a coefficient of 1 as the leading term. So this video is about how to factor trinomials when the leading coefficient is not equal to 1. Okay, something I want to talk about that I didn't talk about in the last video is the x method that some of you have maybe learned from high school. So the x method, it's really the same idea as what I did here. So we have x squared plus 10x plus 16. We still want to find two numbers that multiply to 16 that add to 10. So the way I do it is if I take this 16, I make my list of all possible two numbers that when you multiply them, I get 16 that add to 10. Well, the x method is really the same idea. So up on top, you've got the two numbers, you've got the number that they should multiply to, and then down below we put the 10, and we should find two numbers that add to 10. So then the numbers that go on the side are the two numbers that multiply to 16 that add to 10. So creating this list is the same exact thing as what's happening over here. You just tend to do it in more of a mental math way. So turns out that 2 times 8 gives us 16, 2 plus 8 gives us the 10. So if you were taught the x method instead of creating the list, that's fine if you want to do that. Okay, just wanted to show that x method in case some of you were familiar with it. Alright, so let's get on to what I wanted to talk about in this lesson. So factoring trinomials when the leading coefficient is not equal to 1. So notice this first trinomial, we have a 3 out here in front. The first step you should always do whenever you have a coefficient that is not equal to 1 is check for the greatest common factor. See if we can factor something out, because that will make it much easier to solve. So here I have a 3x squared. You can see that all three of these terms have a 3 in common. So I can factor that 3 out, leaving me with x squared plus 6x plus 5. Okay, well now notice that this trinomial has a coefficient of 1. So we can use all of the methods that we talked about up here, down here. Okay, so this 3 just comes along. What we're going to do is we're going to factor this trinomial right here. So we know the x's go in front. This positive sign tells me that my signs are the same. This sign tells me that they're both positive. Okay, so we want to find two things that multiply to 5. So in this case it's 1 and 5 that add to 6. And so those are going to be the two numbers. Okay, and that x method, that means that 5 goes up here, 6 goes down here, so 1 and 5 must be your numbers. Okay, so this right here is the factored form of that trinomial. The second example, notice that we have a coefficient that's not equal to 1. The first step you should do is see if you can factor out a common factor. So more specifically, the greatest common factor. Notice they all have a 2 that can be factored out of it. So that leaves me with 2 times x squared plus 6 minus 16. Okay, so again, now we have a coefficient of 1, so we can factor this trinomial. So 2, create our parentheses. If you want to do the x thing, that's fine. So 16 goes, actually negative 16 goes on top. We want to add to 6. Okay, and so then we have to think about what two numbers multiply to negative 16 and add to 6. Okay, if you know those right away, you can fill in the table. If not, you can create your list of numbers that multiply to negative 16. Okay, so we can have 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and then 4 times 4. And of course we would just have one negative with any of those possibilities. Okay, so it turns out that I can take 2 and 8. If I multiply those, that would give me a 16. Okay, and then we have to choose which one of these is going to be negative. So since over here this 6 is positive, that tells me that the larger number must go with the positive. So let's go ahead and put the x's down here. We know that from earlier this sign is negative, so that tells me 1 is going to be positive, 1 is going to be negative. This 8 must go with the positive sign, so that way I get a positive 6, and then the other one must be negative 2. Okay, and then those would come over here. So it turns out we have a positive 8 and a negative 2, so those two multiply to negative 16, and they add to positive 6. Okay, so I don't care if you use the list method or if you do the X method. Either one will get you the same results. Okay, so this is the factored form of our trinomial. All right, let's look at some where we can't factor out that greatest common factor that leaves us with that coefficient of 1. So here we have a 2, which of course is not a coefficient of 1. So first thing we want to do is check to see if we can factor that out. We can't, so now we have to go to a different method. So there's two methods that I'm going to show you. There's really no specific name for it. I'm going to call it the AC and then factor by grouping method, because that's essentially what we're doing. Okay, so this method I've seen from a handful of students. So we've got 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. The AC method is that we're still going to take this A term and multiply it by the C term. So our AC in this case is 2 times 15, which gives us the 30. What we're going to do is we're going to make a list of all the factors that multiply to 30. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and then 5 times 6. So we're still essentially kind of doing the same thing that we did on the previous worksheet. We're taking this, essentially we're taking the last term, it's just that now we're multiplying it by that A, writing all the factors down, and then finding which of them add up to 13. So it turns out that it's going to be 3 and 10. Okay, so both of those give us a sum of 13. So the AC and then factor by grouping method, how we do this one is we rewrite the first term. So we rewrite it as 2x squared. We also rewrite the 15. And then this 3 times 10, all I'm going to do is take those two numbers and just separate them so that I rewrite this 13x as 3x plus 10x. Okay, and still that plus 15. So these two are equivalent to each other. The only thing I did was take this 13x and separate it into 3x plus the 10x. Okay, so once we're here, now what we want to do is factor by grouping. So I can take a look at these first two terms, and I can see what they have in common. Turns out they just have an x in common. So what I'm going to do is factor out the x from both of these terms. So we get 2x plus 3. Now I'm going to take these last two terms, and I'm going to factor what's common out of both of those. So here we have a 10x, there's 15. They both have a 5 in common. So I'm going to factor out a 5 from each of these terms. 5 factored out of 10x leaves us with 2x. And then 5 factored out of 15 leaves us with 3. So now notice with this right here, we have a 2x plus 3 and a 2x plus 3 in each of these terms, because this is one term, this is the second term. So since they both have a 2x plus 3, I can factor it out. So 2x plus 3, if I factor that out of the first term, that leaves me with x. If I factor it out of the second term, that just leaves me with 5. So this right here is the factored form of this problem up here. And we can multiply it out to check. 2x times x is 2x squared. Outside, 2x times 5 is 10x, plus the 3x gives me 13x. And the last term, 3 times 5, gives me the 15. So this is the AC factor by grouping method. Okay, the other method, I'm going to use the same exact problem, and I'm going to show you the bottoms up method. Okay, so the bottoms up method is, again, we start with the 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. We start with our original problem. The bottoms up method, it starts off similar that we take a, multiply it by c. So I'm going to take this a, and I'm going to multiply it by c. But when I do that, I'm going to get rid of that coefficient in front. So that leaves me with x squared plus 13x plus 30. Okay, so I multiplied a times c. Well, now we're back to how we have a coefficient of 1, so we can solve it the same way. Here we've got 30, so I'm going to make my list of all the multiples of 30. So we have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6. And so since we have 13 in the middle, we want to add those numbers together. So it turns out that we're going to have 3 times 10, which, just like we did before. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and factor this. So we have x plus 10, x plus 3. So here's how the two differ. Is one, we actually set it up as a factor. So essentially it's like we're factoring just this trinomial with the coefficient of 1 here. Okay, the bottoms up method is that since we multiplied by 2, after we've factored it, we now have to divide by 2. Okay, so I'm going to take this 10 divided by 2 and take this 3 and divide it by 2. Okay, then what we do is we simplify this, so this becomes x plus 5 times x plus, since that one doesn't reduce, we just leave it as x plus 3 halves. And then here's where it gets its name. So bottoms up means that we're going to take the bottom number and move it up. So bottoms up. So that leaves us with x plus 5. And then this side, we brought the 2 up, leaving us with 2x plus 3. Notice it's the same exact answer that we have over here, which is reassuring because we're doing the same exact problem. It's just two completely different methods. So this one is factor by grouping. This one I call the bottoms up method. Let's go ahead and do another example. I'm going to show both of those methods. For my class, it doesn't matter if you do this method or if you do this method. Just pick one and go with it. Okay. So I'm going to show both methods, that way whichever method you choose you can see an example. So here we've got 2x squared minus 7x minus 15. I'm going to do the AC method over here and then factor by grouping. Okay, so again we're going to do the AC method first. So we take A, multiply it by C. Turns out we get 30, which is the same list as above. Okay, so when we factor this, oops, I'm sorry, that's the bottoms up method. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, and we've got 2x squared in the front. We have 15 in the back. Okay, and then we want to be able to use these numbers and give us the negative. Okay, so again, as I was saying, that we want to find these two numbers that combine to negative 7. But one thing to point out is up here we had a positive 30, but down here we have a negative 30, because 2 times negative 15 gives us a negative 30. So that means one of these two numbers must be negative, so that it combines to negative 7. Well, it turns out that if we let this be a positive 3 and a negative 10, that gives us the negative 7. Oh, and then that should be a negative 15. So we just keep that sign. Okay, so once we're here, then we're going to group them. And so I'm going to take these first two and factor out what they have in common. They both have an x, so I can factor out an x, leaving us with 2x plus 3 in parentheses. And now I'm going to take these two terms and factor them. So looking at those, they both have a negative 5 in common. So factoring that out leaves me with 2x plus 3. So notice again that we have two factors that are identical. So 2x plus 3 here, and we have 2x plus 3. So in this term and in this term, we have something that can be factored out. So I can factor out a 2x plus 3. When I factor a 2x plus 3 out of the first term, that leaves me with x. Out of the second term, it leaves me with 5. So this right here is my factored form. Okay, the next method is the bottoms up method. Okay, so here, again, we start with our 2x squared minus 7x minus 15. And so the bottoms up method is, again, that we take that a, multiply it by c, leaving me with x squared minus 7x minus 30. And so the way that I taught it on the previous pages is we're going to take that 30, find all the combinations. And so we've done this a couple times. I'm just rewriting it. Okay, so the method that I showed in the first video is that we're going to find two numbers that multiply to 30 that are a difference of 7. And the reason why it's a difference is because when we go to factor it, that's a negative, which means that my signs are different. Okay, so when my signs are different, that means that we're going to take a difference of these two numbers. Okay, so it turns out that we're going to use the 3 and the 7. Since this is a negative 7, that means the larger number goes with the negative. Okay, so we've got those two terms. Okay, so x plus 3 times x minus 10 is a factor of this trinomial where the coefficient was 1. Okay, because we did the bottoms up where we took this 2 and multiplied it, we now have to divide it. So I'm going to divide both those terms by 2. Since this one doesn't reduce, I'm going to go ahead and bring the 2 up, leaving me with 2x plus 3. This one reduces. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so that leaves me with x minus 5. Okay, notice that we end up with the same answer again because it's the same problem, just solving using two completely different methods. Okay, and then the last problem here. So 6x squared minus 11x minus 35. So I'm going to show you the two methods. So we'll start with the AC, factor by grouping. Okay, so we'll start with 6x squared minus 11x minus 35. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to bring down the first term. So we have 6x squared. The last term, we have negative 35. So what we need to do is we need to figure out what this middle term is. We're going to break down that negative 11. Okay, so I'm going to take my AC, which is 6 times negative 35, which gives me negative 210. So we're going to try to find all the different possibilities of negative 210. Well, that list can be quite long, so I'm just going to go ahead and write them real quick. So 2 times 105, 3 times 70, 5 times 42, 6 times 35, 7 times 30, 10 times 21, and 14 times 15. Okay, again, this right here is negative, meaning that either one of these numbers can be negative. So we can have a negative 2 times a positive 105, or the negative 105 times a positive 2. So we can choose either one of these numbers to be the negative, and we need to make sure that they add to negative 11. Well, it turns out that it's this one right here. So if I take a positive 10x minus 21x, that gives me the same exact value of negative 11. So I didn't change the problem any, I just rewrote it a little differently. Okay, so now that we've got this separated into two different terms, we can now factor by grouping. So I'm going to take these first two. It looks like a 2x can be factored out of both of those, so leaving me with 3x plus 5. And then over here it looks like a negative 7 can be factored out of both of those, leaving me with 3x plus 5 again. Notice that in this first term we have a 3x plus 5, and in this second term we have a 3x plus 5, so I can factor it out. Factoring out of the first term leaves me with 2x. Factoring it out of the second term leaves me with negative 7. So this right here is the factored form of this trinomial. Okay, and then let's do the bottoms up real quick. Okay, so the bottoms up method, so we start with the 6x squared minus 11x minus 35. I can take this 6, multiply it by the negative 35, leaving me with x squared minus 11x minus the 210. Okay, since we have a coefficient of 1, we can factor just like I showed you on the first video. So we get x times x in the front. This sign tells me we have a positive and a negative. Okay, and then looking at this list of all the numbers that multiply to 210, turns out again that 10 and 21 are the two numbers that give us 11. Since it's a negative 11, the larger number goes with the negative number. Okay, so there we factored that trinomial. With the bottoms up method, we multiplied by 6, so that means we have to divide by 6. Okay, and then we're going to reduce each of these fractions. So x plus 5/3, this one reduces to x minus 7. Oh, hold on. So this should be 2. Okay, so 3 goes into 21 7 times, 3 goes into 6 twice. Okay, so that should be a 2. Alright, so now we just do the bottoms up. So if there's a number in the denominator, we just bring it up in front. So we get 3x plus 5, and then 2x minus 7. Okay, so for my class, it doesn't matter if you do this method or the bottoms up method. Some of you have shown me other methods, and that's perfectly fine if you've learned a different way. Essentially, it comes down to either one of these two methods. So that's why I'm showing these two on the video. Like I said, there's other methods. Feel free to use whichever one works best for you.